Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters and friends. It is a joy to have you join us for our very first Faith in Action webinar series. My name is Sandile Makasi, and I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. It gives me great pleasure to start off and kick off this amazing 5-part webinar series that we'll have for the next 5 weeks. I am a member of the G20 Interfaith Forum local organizing committee. And I didn't come alone today. I've got some amazing people who are going to share some wisdom. And our hope for the next hour is to have a conversation, to learn together, and to inspire one another. I'm not alone. I have a co-host. Her name is Yashika. Hello, Yashika. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Sandile, for this wonderful and warm opportunity to share with so many of our wonderful experts the importance of faith in action. And I'm so happy that we're going to be part of this wonderful webinar series for the next few weeks. And we welcome thought leaders and, global teachers that will be part of this journey towards the G20 summit. And we all know that, there are several important pillars that the G20 is going to address. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to being your co-host for the series.
Thank you so much, Yashika. So the theme for tonight is the role of interreligious actors in addressing hunger and poverty. So today, during our conversation, we will explore the role of religiously motivated actors that they play in addressing hunger and poverty. We have some special guests that are with us tonight, and we are so grateful that they took the time to be with us. Without further ado, let me introduce them one by one. First up is Dr. Linda. Welcome, Dr. Linda. It's so good to have you here. Can you please introduce yourself for our friends who are joining from all around the world?
Greetings, everyone, and greetings, Sandile. My name is Linda Naicker. I am a theologian with the PhD in Gender and Religion. My doctoral research focused on food insecurity among under-resourced women in urban South Africa. And I live in Midrand, South Africa. I work at the Research Institute for Theology and Religion at the University of South Africa. And for me, addressing hunger and poverty is deeply personal. I come from a food insecure background way back when. And so I understand firsthand the daily struggles and dignity eroding effects of not having enough to eat. Thank you, Sandile.
Thank you so much, Dr. Linda. We look forward to hearing from you. We have with us this evening, Dr. Renier. Welcome, Dr. Renier.
Thank you, Sandile. Good to be here.
Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm also by training a theologian, although I never worked as a theologian in my life. I've worked in development field and on many kind of networks. I'm full-time director of a non-profit trust that actually is a consortium of churches, a university-based institute that focus on the role that faith communities play in development on many levels. And we work at different levels, partly doing advocacy work, doing policy research, and also implementing concrete projects. So we've partnered in South Africa with our presidency several times. We've worked with international funds to work on health issues, HIV/AIDS, TB. We were a principal recipient for the Global Fund in South Africa for a long time. We work with mining communities, and we work with the head office of several churches that are partners of a kind of a broad consortium, where we try and pull people together with the capacity they have. That include Anglicans, Methodists, Catholics, Reformed, etc., and also other faith communities, not only from Christian tradition. So it's a mixture of many many fields of interest. So our strength of what we do is the strength of the networks with whom we cooperate. And we've actually been doing this work for more than 35 years.
So on that point, Dr. Renier, thank you very much for a broad opening statement and of course sharing with us some of the work that you do. But in addressing this topic, why is it important to you that we look at hunger and poverty, considering the fact that we live in a very diverse country as South Africa, but almost 1/10 of the world's population is plagued with hunger? So why is it important for you to address this particular topic?
Well, reflecting on the theme, I was asking myself, why are people, and especially children, dying in the world and in South Africa still today, when firstly there's enough resources, funding available not to stop it. Secondly, enough excellent research has been done by many university units globally. They know exactly what are the origins, the reasons for this. And thirdly, there are also multiple examples from faith communities, from business networks, from NGOs, of very successful case studies that can prevent it. It simply needs to be scaled up. So my starting with the question is, why do we still have to deal with this scandal? Whose responsibility is it? Why does it happen when the world have enough resources? That is a question that was in the back of my mind preparing for tonight. And then secondly, if I look at the latest UN report on food security and nutrition in the world, the 2024 report, then it shows you that the world is very far from the 2030 Sustainable Development goal of eradicating poverty in the world. In fact, Africa is going backwards. And I have in my notes many examples. I'm only going to quote one. 1 out of 11 people in the world suffers from food insecurity. In Africa, it's 1 out of every 5. And I can go on and go on. And the same statistics apply to South Africa, even in a worse sense. South Africa is actually a very interesting case study. We produce enough food. We export food. South Africa, but we have a lot of stunting and people, 1,000 children die every year from lack of food in South Africa. 15,000 ends up in hospital because of lack of food. Why is this scandal still with us? I'm not going to go into all the examples. I'll share that in my text afterwards. But the fact is, we know why it's happening. We know there are resources available, and there are a lot of faith communities that can do the work. So why is it still happening? This is, for me, the context of the Cape Town Interfaith meeting to deal with this. And I say again, for me, it's the work of faith communities lies at different levels. It's at the advocacy level, it's at a dialogue level, it's at a policy research level, but it's also at an implementation level. And I think we must use the Cape Town G20 meeting to focus what is the strength of this sector to end this scandal, because it is a scandal in the world. Thank you.
It is absolutely indeed. And I think too many people hide behind books and, TV shows, etc., and they do not wish to address the real issues at hand. So just to Dr. Linda Naicker, the next question for me is, you worked in theology, you've done a lot of research in terms of poverty alleviation, but you've also looked at some of the communities in South Africa who have been marginalized for a very long time. What is your take from a faith perspective that propelled you to actually address this topic? Please unmute.
I'm sorry, I'm doing it again. Like I said, my scholarship is directly informed by my lived experience, right? My scholarship not only shaped my worldview, but also, my lived experience shaped my worldview and also my academic path. And so my scholarship in gender and religion is grounded in the realities of under-resourced urban women in South Africa, many of whom face the same hardships I once did. And for me, research is not just theoretical, it's a form of activism. So by highlighting and addressing systemic inequalities, my work aims to contribute to meaningful change for those whose voices are often marginalized. And so you asked about what drives me to, and what can I say about these communities. Research shows that the most marginalized and impoverished people in South Africa are Black African people. And if you look at the history of colonialism, of apartheid, and of the complete denigration under those systems, and then realize that we are still experiencing the effects of those systems, along with ineptness of the present dispensation. So Black women still continue to be the most marginalized of the marginalized. For example, in a deeply under-resourced, impoverished community, Black men who are equally as impoverished as Black women, Black men still hold the economic upper hand and can still wield levels of power over women who are, we say that women's bodies become sites of struggle in the context of food insecurity because they need to then feed their children. So look for or embark on a whole lot of activities, some very bad for them, for their health, and very denigrating and destructive because they are food insecure. So my take on food insecurity and who it affects the most, it's women and children. And as you know, the Millennium Development Goals, Goal 5, speaks about gender equality. And really, for me, I think that's the crux of it, that we're so far from attaining gender equality in so many areas in South African structures. And that goal is directly related to all the other goals, and most in particular, alleviation of hunger and poverty. So I think that is a critical area that we need to really look at, to understand why women continue to be marginalized, why women continue to suffer the most severest brunt of food insecurity, of hunger, and of all manner of related health issues related to food insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Renier, in your comments, there's something I want to latch on to. You talked about the forum that's coming up next month in Cape Town, and how I wrote some remarks here that you said that it's a scandal, this hunger and food insecurity, and that the forum presents an opportunity for us to end the scandal. And as you were talking, you referenced the faith community, since this is an interfaith forum. In your opinion, what about the faith communities best places them to deal with this problem or this scandal, as you have mentioned?
Well, for me, there are two options or two approaches to an answer to this. The one is a fundamental consideration. I think in most faith communities, your faith is a driving force for why you commit to serve your fellow human being, because in the Christian tradition, we say we're all created in the image of God. That is the fundament of our common humanity. In other faiths, you can formulate it different, but our fundamental equality as being created by God is also the fundamental reason for our solidarity to serve one another. I would say that is a starting point of all faiths. On a second level, there's a lot of what I would say kind of practical rationale. Why are faith communities well equipped or well placed to do this? And I'm going to give a few examples that I think is applicable. I've said in the beginning, the work of faith communities can be at many levels, from policy research, advocacy, etc. But I think there are key issues. Why is faith communities well placed to tackle this issue? The one is the location. Faith communities are based where poverty is. I work every day in the Northern Cape in poor communities. In the poorest community in every town in South Africa, you will find a faith community or a local church. So location, they're not fly-by-nights coming in and disappear. There are many faith communities placed within local poor communities. The second one is most faith communities contribute a lot of their own resources, their own time, their own infrastructure in dealing with these issues as a challenge. They're not simply depending on outside funding. The third one is there's a long experience and technical skills that many churches and faith communities have done this for many years. It's not something new. They provide a wide spectrum of services, from basic relief to more sustainable development efforts in a whole spectrum of services. Their approach is holistic. Often the challenge, especially if you work with donors, they write grants that you have to focus on one element, but naturally faith communities look at the holistic person because your economic status, your social status, everything what is the status of the family? Linda's already said women-headed families are most affected by poverty and malnutrition. The power of convening or dialogue. Archbishop Makgoba has a national network consulting mining companies, and he always said faith communities have the ability to bring people to the table, to talk about the challenges. And that's a very important role they can play. So strategically, or I would say these are logistical things that make faith communities suitable to take this challenge. Their direct involvement, but of course it's all based on your fundamental beliefs that makes you resilient, that gives you commitment. You don't stop if a grant stops. Most faith communities remain where they are, regardless of outside funding or government support. They simply do the work because they believe in it. I think that is the strength of faith communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Linda, would you like to add to that question? Thank you.
Absolutely. I concur most certainly with Dr. Rainier. But also just to add that indeed our faith in general, it doesn't matter what faith you pledge your allegiance to, our faith in general compels us to respond to hunger and poverty with compassion, with justice, and with urgency. And so for me, I think if I am going to have to speak about what touches me about my faith and propels me towards this fight towards food justice is actually the Eucharist within the Christian tradition. So the Eucharist tells me or reminds me that I am called not only to worship, but to live out the values of Christ. This means engaging in both immediate relief, such as food banks and community feeding schemes and long-term advocacy for structural change, and also including equitable land reform, sustainable agriculture, and economic justice. Now, you may ask, how does the Eucharist tell me to do these things? So I borrow from a theologian named Biarugaba, who's situated at the University of the Western Cape. And he reminds us that Christian theology, or the Eucharist, also known as Holy Communion, is an act of thanksgiving and a proclamation of Christ's love manifest through his death and resurrection. So the sharing of bread and wine symbolizes not only the body of Christ, but also deeper communal values such as fellowship, sharing, unity, supplication. So personally, it's a symbolic proclamation of Christ's love for both the individual and the world. Politically, it serves as a directive to confront social justice, a social injustice. It urges Christians to be mindful of the empty tables across the world and to look towards a world where there is no more hunger and no more food insecurity. So the Eucharist, therefore, is not just a sacred ritual, but a call to justice, to equality, and to radical compassion. So sharing the Eucharist challenges Christians like myself to embody its meaning beyond the church walls. It's a mandate to dismantle unjust systems and address the root cause of hunger, such as land dispossession, as I've said, poverty, gender inequality. It reminds us that worship must translate into tangible action that affirms human dignity. Inspired by the Eucharist and the voices of theologians like Biarugaba, the church must be a prophetic voice that critiques systems of oppression and walks alongside those impacted by them. Excuse me. Ultimately, my faith calls me to help build a world where no one goes hungry, not just through prayer and ritual, but through deliberate, informed, and sustained action. Thank you, Sandile.
That was so beautifully said and so beautifully put. Too many people look at religion very literally, that we go to church on a Sunday or a mosque on a Friday, we pray, and then we go home to our own walls. Yet what you just said is we need to live beyond the church. We need to see God in everything and in all. And I think that was very nicely put in terms of your analogy. Thank you, Dr. Linda. My next thing is taking faith from one aspect and working with different denominations and different religious traditions. So, Dr. Rainier, this question is for you as well. What are some of the examples that you can cite of interreligious cooperation in addressing poverty in South Africa? Now, as I've said before, we're a land of great diversity. We have so many religious traditions in the country, and each one is so unique in doing the work to assist in poverty alleviation. Have you worked in an interreligious environment to bring together some levels of dignity to the poor, and to, perhaps cite some examples of your experience? Perhaps the interdenominational one that you've mentioned earlier on, and then perhaps the interfaith one as well.
Yes, let me say, one of the networks that we founded 25 years ago is called the National Religious Association for Social Development. You will not know the name. The name is not important. What is important is that it is a network of networks. And when we secured the first grants from the Global Fund to fight HIV/AIDS in South Africa, we practically consulted all the denominations and different religions to try and cooperate and put a consortium together. Now, what we found in this is often in traditions, if you want to be effective, people work in their own religious kind of structures. But at a certain level, if you don't cooperate at a strategic level, you don't make progress, not with your own government and also not internationally. So I think you must respect that. But I also learned that if you focus on the practical basic needs of people, then differences of religion and of doctrine becomes less important. So we had a case, we live in a world now full of tensions, but in our network at a point, we had Muslims and Jews and Christians working in the same network for the same objectives in South Africa. If you focus on the life needs of people struggling to survive every day, then our time we spent on our doctrines becomes less important. But we must be sensitive that every structure has its own kind of dynamics, and you must allow for that. You don't have, what I mean by this, we didn't insist that on every level, everything should be interreligious or interdenominational. Although that in practice, in the programs that we rolled out with government, if you work at local level in a local community, then you have to work interfaith and interreligious. You don't ask if someone belongs to a religion if he is in need. What is count is how do you respond to his need? And I think most faith communities and denominations realize that and practice that. So I can honestly say if we focus on priorities to make a difference, then what divides us becomes less important. And we've built friendships across all the lines in South Africa in this process. And we live in a context in the world at the moment where this is difficult. It's really, but focusing on the real needs is very important for me to transcend a lot of those differences. Thank you.
That's beautiful. And I think the idea is when we transcend the journey of our doctrines and what the faith commandments are about, we actually see humanity for who they are. Dr. Linda, perhaps from your experience, can you share some examples of interfaith cooperation in South Africa in particular?
Yes, one of the organizations that I work with is We Will Speak Out South Africa, which is works in an interfaith manner, but within the South African context. I think there are many examples of interfaith religious actors that have made an impact in caring for vulnerable communities. For example, under Archbishop Desmond Tutu's patronage, the Desmond Tutu TB Center has combined health, education, and community outreach through initiatives like Kick TB and support for HIV and AIDS orphans, directly engaging with and reducing stigma around TB in vulnerable populations. And then in Khayelitsha, there's the faith-founded Baphumelele Children's Home, which provides daily food, healthcare, education, and refuge to over 250 children and HIV/AIDS affected adults, employing 150 staff in the Cape Flats. Then there's a Swavana Children's Project in Mpumalanga that's supported by local churches and NGOs, which feeds 400 orphaned and vulnerable children daily via school-based vegetable gardens. This reduces the cost of food from 4,800 a month for households to 900 monthly. And then there's the Mangahung Dikonyana community-based care center that uses church-linked community gardens to feed 130 people 5 days a week. And all this while still providing agricultural training and income-generating opportunities. So nationwide religiously aligned NGOs such as Operation Hunger and Alfeco Foundation run biodiverse community gardens and breakfast feeding programs. Operation Hunger serves up to 2,000 people per garden and feeds 250 animals daily, while providing more than 2 million meals to 10,260 learners in 2024. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those examples. And you know, as I'm listening to you, I feel so inspired, and I'm pretty sure that our viewers are also feeling the same. And in cases like this, I usually find, you know, people asking themselves, okay, this sounds great that people are working together. It sounds great that there are opportunities for people of different faiths to unite and make a big difference in the community. There might be someone out there who's listening to this webinar and asking themselves, okay, so, you know, I'm in my community and pretty much I do a lot of the things within my religious space, in other words, within my denomination or my faith. And they might be interested to start working with people of other faiths. So my question I'd like to pose to each of you is, what lessons or what principles can people who are interested to do that learn from these various examples that you have placed? We'll start with Dr. Renier.
Sandile, it's in a sense difficult to give a general answer to that, because what makes churches really effective is that they analyze locally where they are based, what are the most urgent needs, and how do you create and organize the resources around it. So there may not be one size that fits everybody, but in terms of if you don't create a joint vision at local level and create resources around that, you will not be sustainable in what you're doing, or neither would you be effective or resilient to keep on doing. So, but what I've seen from our projects, and we've done work for the Department of Social Development in working with vulnerable children in 5 provinces. For the Global Fund, we've worked across South Africa, is that the solutions in every community differs sometimes from other communities to start with. And local church leaders, like Linda said, have to realize that they not only serve their own community, they serve the whole community. Your community as a faith community is the world outside, those in need, as a general rule. But your specifics depends on what is the resources where you are. And often faith communities have links with businesses. There are enormous platforms in South Africa that distribute surplus food. Food Forward, SA Harvest. There are numerous national programs, but the context of South Africa, if I may be concrete, we have a shortage of 50,000 social workers. And we have sometimes policy problems where national policies hinders partnerships and effectiveness of churches. I want to give you one, because I don't want to drop this one, or 2 things. It's easy to talk, but I want to come back to the question at the end: who's responsible? How do we use our natural resources? That is that's a political debate. That's a debate about justice. We have the largest cabinet in the world. We are 0.5% of the GDP of the world. How do you justify that? Where the national resources go? So this is a difficult discussion on the one hand, but it's a discussion also at every local level. How do you use the available resources where it's most needed? So I won't say there's one answer that fits every occasion, but especially as faith communities, we have access to different communities in terms of expertise, in terms of resources, and you have to bring them all together to focus them. I think that is what we try to do over and over again, because we still face the scandal and we have to answer, are we as church leaders going to take that responsibility at our meeting in Cape Town? Not only for South Africa, but this is a global one. This is a global issue. It's the issue that Brazil answered very successfully to start their global program to fight poverty. But how do we deal with it concrete? I think this is our challenge for the upcoming conference in Cape Town.
Thank you, Dr. Renier. As you were talking, we received a question, and I think it's based on what you were saying about, the example you gave about the different people of faith, like Muslims, Jewish, Christians, working together. The question from the audience is, can you share just one example of that collaboration, maybe one project or thing that was done, please?
Well, the biggest one we had was the Global Fund grant that we managed for South Africa for 9 years, providing services for HIV, for orphans, for people that lost their parents, children. And in this project, all faith communities were involved. The challenge you sometimes face is that if you get international grants, they prescribe to you where you should work. So you're not free to choose. And secondly, they expect a certain quality of your partnership in terms of management. You cannot receive lots of funding if you don't have the capacity to manage that funding. So there are many concrete challenges you have to deal with, but our Global Fund grants that we got were national grants, and we worked with all faith communities, and we had different churches and different religions receiving the funds all over the country. So for me, that was one of the biggest ones that we've thus far managed to with great success, to implement it. Because we lobbied jointly to get the grant, and we were able to implement it jointly. And it made a huge difference. In many of those projects, they didn't stop when the grant stopped. They simply continued. So for me, our national HIV and TB grant is probably the best one in size that I could mention.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Renier. My next question is for you, Dr. Linda. And, in the things that we discuss, especially around aid or, poverty alleviation, which we've already kind of talked about very well today, most of that work is usually emergency type and short term. What can religious actors do to move beyond the short term to more long-term sustainable outcomes?
Yeah. So I think, there are most certainly several examples in South Africa of inter-religious collaborations. I know of quite a few of them. And these examples actually teach us that cooperation can significantly amplify and impact and efforts to fight hunger and poverty by pooling diverse resources, networks, moral influence. And what I've learned from the working together of these faith-based institutions is that they show us that when faith communities unite around shared values like compassion, justice, and human dignity, they can transcend theological differences or religious differences to serve the common good. So practical collaboration then, such as joint food gardens, feeding schemes, advocacy, as Renier has also mentioned, demonstrate how faith-based unity can produce tangible, sustainable outcomes. And these initiatives also highlight the importance of cultural sensitivity, local engagement, and inclusive dialogue in building trust and long-term solution. So I think the key in working together then is the idea of what is that term? Unity within diversity, you know? And so then to answer your question, Sandile, how can we as religious actors move from beyond short-term relief to long-term development? So religious actors in South Africa are increasingly shifting from short-term hunger relief to long-term strategies that empower communities and address the root cause of poverty. Don't get me wrong, there is still a lot more that needs to be done. And I say that with a disclaimer, the statement that I've just made. What I found in my own research, just to digress a little bit, is that there are many initiatives, even governmental initiatives. The thing is that especially when it comes to the initiatives to alleviate hunger and poverty by government institutions, you find that a lot of them duplicate each other. There's a lot of confusion. One doesn't know what the other one is doing. There needs to be that level of networking and collaboration and advocacy that incorporates all stakeholders, community, big business, government, the religious sector, in fact, all sectors. So I just want to give you an example. The Methodist Church, to get back now to what we were speaking about, the Methodist Church of Southern Africa runs a mentorship program that helps youth gain skills and access employment. And this reduces economic dependency and food insecurity. And then there's a neo-Pentecostal church. It's called Hope Restoration Ministries, and they offer vocational training and literacy programs aimed at breaking cycles of poverty and enabling sustainable livelihoods. And then there's Africa Full Gospel Church, which combines urban entrepreneurship training with rural farming projects. And these reach over 3,000 individuals annually to promote food production and economic resilience. And then African initiated churches as well have a skills development and HIV care. They've integrated this into their ministry, and this fosters holistic empowerment in the context of poverty and hunger. Similarly, Never Ending Gardens has created 60,000 backyard gardens across South Africa, enabling communities to grow their own food. So, you know, to think that there is a lot being done, but we've not touched the surface, I think it's because there's a lack of collaboration. There's a lack of putting our heads together. And I think, you know, too often when faith-based institutions come together, we address the immediate issue of hunger, which is well and good. It must be addressed. So we'll do soup kitchens and that kind of immediate feeding scheme things. But concomitant with that, we need to be addressing the structural and systemic issues that have created the situation where our food system in South Africa, our very food system in South Africa is broken. And for me, I just want to, I did some research, Sandile. It was for a paper that I wrote for the African Consortium for Law and Religion Studies, where I spoke about our broken food system in South Africa and how the COVID-19 pandemic laid that brokenness bare. You know, we knew that we were in trouble. We knew that hunger and poverty is a pandemic in South Africa. We knew that. But then came COVID-19 at a time when South Africans were supposed to be social distancing, and us middle class and economically able people were doing just that, using our masks, social distancing. But the very poor, our people, the very poor, what happened to them? They had to stand in lines that were snaking kilometers next to each other to receive food parcels. If that doesn't tell us how broken the food system in South Africa is, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very provocative, conclusion that you've just shared, because as much as faith-based organizations are doing enough work in terms of, hamper distribution, soup kitchens that you mentioned, sandwich making, etc., we're not really meeting the full target. And I'm glad that you mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the big questions is, are we ready for the next pandemic as religious institutions in the country? Can we actually work together to actually, relieve the poorest of the poor? And it comes to my question around impact. Has there been tangible measurements around the impact of interfaith or interdenominational work, groups of people or churches working together to alleviate poverty? Any example that can show what the impact has been. In fact, we're challenging today many of the religious institutions. We say, every day you go out there, you create your soup kitchens, you have your sandwiches, but what is the impact of the community? Is it short-term because somebody is able to have food for the day? What is the long-term plan for those communities? And I think what is wonderful, Dr. Linda, is you mentioned, some of the Grow Green initiatives that's taking place in the country. But has that impact been measured? And to what extent? Is it only to certain communities or areas? We've not really seen much of a dent in terms of unpacking that. And thirdly, political challenges. Is there enough political will by the civil society to engage government to say, open the pathways so that we can work together? Are there those challenges? So maybe you would like to respond to that, Dr. Linda, and then I would go to Dr. Renee.
Again, I think when we're talking about measuring impact, there's very little way of knowing, because as much as there is a level of interfaith collaboration with regard to addressing hunger and poverty, I still don't think it's done in a much more in a meaningful way, in a way that that there is actually this kind of a praxis-driven orientation of how we work. We work together. We go into communities and we address issues of food insecurity, and then we have measurables. We measure. I really don't know that whether within the faith sector, as we work together, whether that level of interaction is actually taking place. I do know that that there is this effort to work together. There's a trying, but I do believe that we all need to be much more deliberate in how we address food insecurity in South Africa. We really need to come together with a better plan, to come together with all stakeholders, and really, come to the drawing board for, firstly, and map out how we would go about doing this. So in my experience, the long-term impact of faith-based interventions in poverty and hunger alleviation is best assessed by how deeply they empower individuals and transform communities beyond immediate relief. Sustainable outcomes, are visible when projects shift from handouts to skill building, land access, local food production, breaking cycles of dependency. Impact also is reflected in changed mindsets when communities begin to see poverty and hunger not as a fate, but as an injustice that can be challenged through collective faith-driven action. So the success of such intervention is further evident in intergenerational benefits, right? We want to see that, where children of beneficiaries gain improved access to education, to nutrition, to opportunity. So ultimately, the most meaningful faith-based efforts will embed justice, dignity, self-determination into the heart of their mission, creating lasting change rooted in both spirituality and structural transformation. Those aspects are key for me.
Excellent. Dr. Renier, measuring impact, has that been done significantly in the faith-based communities? Do you think there's much more work that needs to be done? And tagging to that particular question, we live in a world of technology. We live in a world of digitization. A lot of the Eastern countries, for example, have utilized technology to enable them to reach the poorest of the poor. Have we done that as South Africans collectively? And what can be done to improve the space of reaching out to the poor?
Yeah, that's a question that I've been busy with for many years, because we were recipient of many international grants. And if you work in a relationship as a recipient of a big grant, measuring your impact is always the bottom line. I like this question because it all depends on what questions you ask. If you want an outcome in 3 years or 1 year, then I would say to a donor, no, keep your money, I'm not interested. Faith communities and churches respond to the needs. I'll give you one example. In Stellenbosch, a church started one of the most famous high schools in the country, producing the most Springboks in South Africa. Paul Roos High School was started by a Reformed church. From the high school, developed the Faculty of Theology. From the Faculty of Theology, developed the University of Stellenbosch. And I can show you many examples in the world that many universities were started by faith communities in the world. That's a long-term impact, but also on creating a leadership in the world. I want to give you 3 examples. The studies of Chief Justice Zondo in South Africa was paid by a Muslim person that has a shop in the community where he came from. The impact of that support of him to conclude his legal studies without any other support, he became Chief Justice of South Africa. Thuli Madonsela's studies as a lawyer were funded by Beyers Naudé, a pastor. Dr. Taban, one of the world-renowned lung specialists in the world, was supported through the Catholic Church until he concluded all these medical studies. I can give you many examples. So what I want to say depends on your duration. What is your time frame for measuring your impact? Sometimes it's short-term, sometimes it's long-term. You have to do both. Also in terms of, on the scale of relief to sustainable development, it's a process. And there are actually many things brewing at the moment. We had 2 weeks ago a big seminar with Archbishop Makgoba and Bishop Sepuka, who's president of the South African Council of Churches, on a new initiative to strengthen democracy and human dignity in South Africa. It's a dialogue that has been going on for the last 15 years. And to start also new partnerships to explore the whole issue of dependency on grants and a mentality where people don't want to care for themselves. You must remember that in the dark apartheid days, the only option for many of our black leaders were church-based schools in the rural areas. And because of that, and because of good teachers from Ireland that taught maths and science, I know a lot of senior business leaders in South Africa now that had quality education and now are CEOs of big companies in the world because of that education they received in church-based schools. So I want to say measuring impact is very important, but it's not so easy to do that. And sometimes we work with a very short-term time frame, and it doesn't do justice to the long-term effect what is happening. But of course, we have to come back and to say, what is the reality now, taking our focus on food security in the world. And at the Bishop Court meeting, Bishop Sepuka, and I'll make this available to for the report on this event, said Ubuntu is much more than just giving people food. It's our common humanity, caring for one another and taking responsibility for our future, for the sustainable way we produce an income and to become independent, and not a nation dependent on grants. I will share this with you because that's a process, and it's not an easy process, but it's a commitment, and it's a commitment faith communities want to make. And senior faith leaders are involved in this process. But I'll share some of that with in my report to afterwards.
Thank you so much. You know, as I've been reflecting on this conversation, I've truly been inspired. I've really learned a lot. And, you know, one thing that's lingering in my mind is how fundamental policy is to this conversation. And when I say policy, I'm referring to government policy or a policy at the G20 level. In your opinions, how can the people of faith contribute or influence government and G20 policies and agendas, especially around issues of food security and sustainable development? I'll start with Dr. Linda first, and then we'll invite Dr. Renier to also comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandile. I think firstly, as faith-based institutions and organizations, we need to actually acknowledge and take seriously the idea that people of faith can contribute to and influence government and G20 policies by mobilizing their moral authority, their grassroots networks, and lived insight to advocate inclusive, justice-orientated food systems. Faith communities often serve as first responders to hunger and poverty, positioning them as credible voices to inform policy from the ground up, particularly through evidence-based testimonies and community-driven models, through ecumenical and interfaith coalitions. Religious actors can amplify their influence in policy spaces, framing food security not only as a developmental concern, but as a moral and ethical imperative aligned with human dignity. Their ability to foster public discourse, shift cultural narratives, and engage in civic education enables them to build social pressure and hold government accountable to their commitments under the SDGs and the G20 development frameworks. So ultimately, the theological framing, for example, of justice, stewardship, and compassion equips faith actors. And I'm using the term theological not just for the Christian context, but for theologies of other faiths as well. So yeah, the very theological framing of justice, stewardship, compassion, and love equips faith actors to advocate for structural transformation rooted in both ethical conviction and practical expertise. So you will notice, Sandile, from my entire feedback or discussion, I am really convinced that we need to address this from a structural and systemic place, and I am of the absolute belief that faith-based actors are most certainly pivotally placed to be able to start the conversation and to get things going from the ground up, because it is absolutely imperative that those who have a voice to speak, or those who are allowed to speak, don't drive things, but that ground root communities or grassroots communities who are suffering the impact of poverty, unemployment, and all the structural issues that lead to food insecurity, malnutrition, and all those issues, that they are the ones that are the primary voices in how we will address the problem and take it forward. I strongly believe that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Renier?
I want to answer this at two levels. I've asked in the beginning who's responsible for this scandal and who takes responsibility to stop it. Bishop Sopuka has said we as faith leaders and church leaders have to stand up and say it's our responsibility. Secondly, there are excellent blueprints on the table that spell out a problem for South Africa. How do you solve this problem in South Africa? It has been designed under the leadership of Professor Julian May of the Center for Food Excellence of the University of the Western Cape. He's also a member of the President's Planning Commission, and he will be a speaker at the G20 in Cape Town. So there are blueprints available, but it is up to us to rectify also in South Africa policies that is a hindrance to partnerships and collaboration. And I want to give you one example, because these are the easy ones that we can solve fast. There's a unit in the Department of Social Development with whom we've worked for many years. They do excellent work, fantastic work. But more recently, they adopted an approach that only designated child-registered institutions may provide the support that we've done for 20 years comprehensively in rural areas. Unless you're registered or designated as a designated child support NGO, you can't receive funds from our government, which is absolutely nonsense. They don't have the staff, they don't have the money, they don't have the expertise, and they know we've done good work. And still, it's a policy guideline at the moment. That's the easy things. You can change it by just scrapping what is nonsense. But more than that, sit around a table and say, what can we do together? Because there's actually a lot of good things being done in government, but it's not being implemented. So at many levels, we can look at South Africa as a case study. What are the low-hanging fruit that is easy to change? Some of these issues are structural. Linda is correct. Some of them are complex. The whole food chain, the whole procurement chain, these are complex arrangements globally. But there are experts available that can help with that. But that's not an excuse not to take responsibility. For me, the upcoming conference in South Africa, in Cape Town, is an opportunity for South Africans, for Southern Africa, to say, what can we as faith leaders do to put pressure, to come up with proposals, to ensure there's collaboration, to ensure that there's change, that we don't live with this as something, as a permanent challenge that we cannot solve. I think it's up to us. It's the resilience of faith leaders not to make this normal, to say we're not going to accept it anymore. And I'm thankful for the leadership of Bishop Sopuka and Archbishop Makgoba in this regard, because they have several initiatives that will boost this on a national level coming up.
Thank you so much for those wonderful words and great insight to both Dr. Linda and Dr. Renee. And just to, sum up this wonderful discussion, I think first and foremost, you both agree that faith is responsible, faith is important, and faith is perhaps the pivotal space in which we can start engaging the issues around hunger and poverty in South Africa. And that, however, within the space of that, the structural issues need to be looked at. The systemic issues that we have in the country must be dealt with. And faith has a role to play both in advocacy, but also at the same time at a very practical level. And thank you, Dr. Renier, for saying that actually it's the faith-based communities that live closest to the problem. They can identify the problem. And through the years and examples in our country, some of the seminaries have given rise to all these measurable impacts where faith played a pivotal role in serving the closest communities. We also have with us in our communities visionary leadership. And you mentioned quite a few times some of the names like Archbishop Thabo as an example. Bishop Tutu was one of the foremost visionaries in our country. And perhaps we need to take a lead from them to push civil society as people who can advocate for changes to come. Let us perhaps work with low-hanging fruit where certain policies can be changed and changed with effect immediately, but also try and rope in the partnerships across the board. In the Hindu faith, there's a saying, service to humanity is worship of God. And for a long time, the communities don't like to, talk about service because they're always in the background and they say, it's a kind of it's an ego space. But ironically, some of the organizations have been measuring the impact of the flood disaster that took place in KwaZulu-Natal, where all the faith communities came together. And the impact has been quite significant. Almost 600 million rands of service has been done in a small space of time, in eastern KwaZulu-Natal. So it shows the level of impact by civil society working together. At the point of the flood, nobody said, I am Hindu or Muslim or Jew or Christian. They saw that there was a disaster and there was a natural need to respond. And I think it's important that faith has this within them, that they have the ability to transcend doctrine and they're able to reach humanity so that we can have dignity amongst the poorest of the poor. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation today. And we look forward to having all of you again in the future, in the next few weeks, with the oncoming webinars. I think the next one is going to be really significant because it's going to deal with the issues around economic justice. And Sandile, that will take place in a week's time.
Yes, it takes place. I'm so sorry. Takes place in a week's time at 7 p.m. next week, same time. And all of this will be available if you go to www.g20interfaith.org. That's where all the information is. As you log in on that page, the Faith in Action webinar series is there. But I just want to thank our guests this evening, Dr. Renier and Dr. Linda, for your valuable insights, for stirring our souls. I think what you've done today, you've really helped us to look within, not only our faith, but within our humanity, what we need to do. And each of us can make a significant difference. And so thank you so much, Dr. Renier and Dr. Linda. It was very good to be with you. We're looking forward to engaging further on these topics and many others.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Yashika. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, friends.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.